Remember when I said I'm a bit bored right now and I want to create something small and cool and cute. I want to create a goblin tank, probably. Well, it's not gonna be a goblin tank, it's going to be a hobbit tank, because the second breakfast is not going to defend itself. Chapter 1. Bases and References. I have based myself on these drawings by Hayao Miyazaki and light tanks like the French FT-17 or the Japanese Eigo tank, especially because of this camouflage. So I started to design a Ghibli and a Hobbit or Halfling model, like in this expert degree drawing, which, yeah, it exists. It's the first thing I can say. I started from this toy excavator base and the semi-sphere and that green thing. That's the cockpit of an Apache helicopter. I have cut the parts that I needed to glue these two parts together and make the whole of the tank. By the way, don't worry, don't throw away those side panels. And something that I have done is dry fitting. This is dry fitting, it's not gluing things to other things basically. Okay, now I gonna cut these things of this tank, AMX-40 tank, I guess, to make some kind of front suspension for the tank. Afterwards, everything is marked well, we can cut with the Dremel. Then I will use some model glue, which dissolves the plastic and thus have a stronger union. This is a white tube of creme. I'm not sure, it was a white tube of something, that's for sure, and will be the base for the turret, our tower that we will have later. Now I'm gonna glue here a small panel of the Apache that I didn't throw before, and it's time to glue the wheels in the front. For the sides, I have created these things with plastic at all credit cards, which will allow to put the wheels more lower. I'm gonna also put with the Dremel that small shape on the front ramp, also gonna sand the threads in order to allow them to glue better to the threads later. These plastic tracks came from that old AMX for the tank kit, and it was a horrible idea to use them, because unlike rubber, it's very elastic and well, you couldn't glue this thing with super glue. However, you can use them as a template to draw on a EVA foam as a template and then cut it. And once you have to trim them a bit more since it's quite long, and then with the excess you can do something really interesting, which is, again, don't throw it to the trash, and you can create rubber pads with exactly the same width as the threads that you will glue later, as you are seeing right now. Maybe it even works to create bricks, I'm not sure. And well, this is the build making stuff part of the video, because I learned this technique thanks to him. Please visit his channel, you will learn a lot of cool things and techniques. Lastly, those things that I'm gluing are the guide teeth of the tracks, and I only have glued some of them in really strategic places, which are visible, since I imagine the rest of them will be hidden behind the small wheels, etc. Then I'm gonna reinforce the EVA foams with super glue. This will harden the EVA foam. For the turret, this thing was a headlight from a Meccano toy car, I guess, and I'm gonna cut that bulb, don't throw it away. It's more or less the same size of the white cylinder from before, and now we have to make a cannon using this RC car antenna thing, and the pen tip is just for having a reference at hand. we have to take measurements by superimposing the turret over the barrel, and then it's just to cut it, and that's all. To make the cannon hole, I'm gonna hit this metal, and then the hole that remains just has to be enlarged with, for example, an X-Acto knife or whatever you have of hand. I will use an X-Acto knife, Dremel. Basically, you need to create a kind of oval shape in order to show that the cannon can have movement upwards and downwards. And in our case, we're gonna do just that. It is not just aesthetics, it's gonna work. Afterwards, I will hit this pin to make a hole for the internal side of the cannon. In all tanks, the side uses to be in the left or the right of the barrel, allowing the gunner to rest his head and aim. The way to make the hole is the same as before. First a small hole, and then, little by little, it gets bigger with the X-Acto knife. I've also covered that hole on the right that I accidentally made, and now I'm going to glue magnets on the barrel, so I can allow elevation and depression for the barrel. Once that's done, I'll use glue tack to immobilize the barrel, and glue the other magnets inside the turret, for which I will use baking soda, since this gives more structure and body to the magnets and speeds up the drying. Here we can see a bunch of bits and pieces, of which I am only going to use that piece of pen, that circular thing from a truck transmission, small wheels, a green panel from the Apache, and this metal grill. By the way, this white thing is a piece of pen that would also work as a cannon perfectly. That's why I wanted to show it, in case you do not want to complicate your life such much as they do. This will do the job, basically. You just have to glue it and you have a cannon on the go. Then this is one wheel, too good to have two wheels, which will be basically a sort of transmission of the tractor wheels. This is also from the same Sherman, and they are groups of springs for the suspension of the Sherman. In this case, they will work as a second set of transmission gears, and this thing is literally a broken scale military truck transmission. Now we could glue the transmission in place, but we are not gonna do that, because we need to put panels on the sides of the engine. I use an expired credit card to get free plastic card. Make a hole there, widen the hole, and then to make it more symmetrical, you can use your X-Acto knife. What you want to achieve, it's a kind of sort manufacturer piece, so that's the reason we're using the X-Acto knife right now. Now is when we can cut the mesh in a similar shape to the panel. Voila! Perfect. Now I'm gonna put super glue with the tip of this pin and then glue the mesh inside. It doesn't matter if there are gaps in between the panels or the hull, because now we'll fill them. The idea is to use super glue gel and then baking soda, and once dry, we can cut off the excess and sand it. For this project, I really didn't want to use any kind of putting. I just wanted to show that to fill gaps, you can use easy techniques, household things like the super glue, Loctite, and baking soda. And now, we almost can glue the transmission, but not now. We're gonna wait a bit, because we need to mark this with a pen and then do this with the Dremel, because now this gap will allow the mechanical hobbit of the village to remove the transmission cover for maintenance. Then I'll use plastic glue to fill those ugly gaps. I will also glue this piece of non-Games Workshop weapon as an exhaust pipe, and I will fix it here with ultra liquid glue, which acts by capillarity when gluing on plastic. What you see down here is just to understand where the hatch should go, because guns occupy the inside of the turrets. Since they are full of things, you only see a small part sticking out. and that's why the hatch will be on the side of, or not exactly on the back, or right, or just above the gun. It is usually in one side. Once you have a good hole, you can cover it with a bit of plastic like this pen pad of a big pen. Now I'm gonna use this plastic thing, which I'm not sure what is, to be honest, and I'm gonna bend it and cut it to use it as the end of the exhaust pipe, shaped like a mushroom, which I guess that fits with the Ghibli and Hobbit aesthetic. By the way, that half dome came from the previous video. It's one of the drone eyes or cameras that I have used. Well, that I have used in that drone, but one of the ones that I didn't use in the end. I will use these caps as scale headlights, but first we have to make a hole, and I have to cut that thing that I will save for later. Make a hole there, stick a wire in it, and now I'm gonna test this with the turret to see if it turns well or not, because I'm going to cry a lot and very loudly if when it's painted it rubs and scratches off the paint. Okay, it works. It just works. Nice. I glue this pen tip right there, and now I'm gonna do this type of U-shaped thing using this pin, because it's gonna be a kind of winch or hook. With these plastic cylinders that I got from a sprue, I'm going to make covers for the engine, for example, for the fuel, oils, etc. I will use extra thin glue a second time, because the capillarity allows this to glue perfectly to the engine room without messing everything. And I will glue that part of the caps. And that green thing is one of the panels that was left over from cutting the Apache chairs, that I'm going to use as extra front spaced armor. Just like that. Now reminds me Cell from Dragon Ball. Perfect. That U-shaped thing is a kind of grip made from a pin or wire that you just have to hit and nail it to the sides. I'm also going to put rivets. Mine are made from plastic, but you can use these small metal balls.
Let's go! Mamma mia!
These rivets came from a World War I tank kit as extras, and now I'm gonna make holes with these pins in the tracks to glue the pin heads as a kind of track pin. I have said pin a lot of times, I know, yeah. You will get a lot of detail quite cheaply and easily, but it takes a lot to make it, that's for sure. It's slower than making this edition. So that's the reason I was listening to an audiobook. I'm gonna glue the rest of the plastic rivets in this area of the transmission, and then on the track supports. And by the way, I glue off camera these magnets on the back part side, because it's where we will connect things. Yep. And now I'm gonna glue a piece of wire there to make it look like a hinge, and also in the rest of the panels and in the second panel, because it will look like it can be opened. This is a part where we make accessories and details, I think. I noticed that these needles to inflate balls and wheels are the same diameter to fit inside the barrel. I use these as an automatic cannon for turrets, but only the small part. Usually. I will also use this part of a broken recharger as a projectile. And since I don't live in America, maybe some of you are watching this from America, and you do not have normal plugs, you can use this part of a toy magazine, a pistol magazine, which has exactly the same shape as a plug, electrical plug. I'm gonna use cardboard to create a kind of thing to hold those extra bullets that can be inside the box, which by the way I didn't make, I bought that one. For make this cartridge, I basically use popsicle stick, toothpick and Sherman wheels, and the idea now is to put magnets to make these modular, but not now. Now I'm gonna make the fuel tank for the flamethrower using beads and also a shit ton of loctite, including on the edges where there are joints, and it's basically to sand it after the loctite and to have a kind of a smooth surface to the touch. By the way, this has taken a long time. Please like, subscribe and hit on notifications because I'll do more stuff like this, and it makes my day out to know that you like these things. I need another piece of a stick to make a support for the fuel tank. I will glue this round thing that came out from a truck's transmission, and from this fuse I remove the label inside and sand the glass, so at this small scale it looks more like a realistic quartz glass thing. I'll glue a spring on the other side to then glue a fuel cable for the flamethrower. And then I will glue in the tip a small magnet. I also glue a small piece of cardboard as support for the cable there. Then I will glue the fuse, which is a kind of pressure tank, on the top. And since it looks very cylindrical, I'm going to cut in half those spheres of those pins to make to have some kind of semi-domed shape for the cylinders. This tool is a pyrograph. It's a tool that can make holes or engrave wood. I glue that non-Games Workshop flamethrower barrel on this motorcycle handlebar, which also magically fits perfectly on the barrel because YOLO, I guess. Now it's time to glue magnets on the base of the tank. And well, does it make sense that a tank equipped with a flamethrower face other tanks? I guess not. I guess absolutely not. But there is an answer for that, and the answer is...
I like flamethrowers!
And of course, all of this was real. This is the Churchill copyright, for example. But the perfect Churchill was not that one. The best Churchill was the petard. So look for real things that might surprise you and inspire you in equal parts when creating new projects. Now I will create a distillery, because why not? They are hobbits. I'm going to make this mobile distillery for the hobbits using this toy barrel and this plastic dome thing. I will hit this spring thing and nail it there. But because it looks ugly, I'm gonna glue there some beads. And this part of the Apache cockpit will be cut as a kind of a small panel for the distillery, because to control pressure and such type of things. Now I will create veins on the wood, but you should not take the blade like before. You have to take it like right now to have more control on the blade and don't slip and don't cut your own finger, okay? Again, because I have this tool, the pyrograph, I prefer to melt the plastic to create more deep detail with less effort. Basically, you just need a respirator because you are melting plastic, that's for sure. But for the rest, it's quite easy to use. Now, then, it's only to sand everything. And you can use a water brush to remove the excess of plastic shavings. And now it's time to make a support for the barrel. I'm gonna glue this EVA foam to the wooden board, which I will paint as a kind of metallic thing later. To make a tab, I will heat up this pin and stick it here and here. But because I'm bored, I'm gonna glue this part of a lighter there, and that semi-spherical thing. And now is when we are creating the tab. Basically, that is the head of a pin, which will look and act like a valve. And now it's time to create a big valve, pressure valve, with the toy car wheel, wheel from a clock gear, and a drone eye. And well, this has sense? I guess not, but you can ask the Brits because they make these things for tanks. So yeah, I guess that my logic works, or at least well as British one. I gonna glue that golden ball in that hole, and now glue that thing there, and let me check if hobbits do hobbits like beer? Hobbits? Yeah. That rear-facing tank is what based my tank destroyer, the British Archer. Those periscopes came from a T-34, and that white tube comes from, well, here. The machine gun was made from plastic cylinder sprue, a wire, and toy bullets from a pistol toy thing. Don't use real bullets for this. The rest of the techniques used in this thing, I have used them exactly the same on the rest of the tank. But now, the idea was to create an observation tower or post like these ones of World War I and World War II. To create this door, I have used this horrible plastic, which is useless for anything else, but perfect for this. It looks quite small, right? Like the Hobbit cannot fit inside. Well, it's based on submarine hatches. Those things were really small and tight and claustrophobic, such as tank hatches. This is a Sherman tank hatch drive, a Sherman driver tank. I gonna glue those hinges there on the door, and now I gonna show you how I transform that plastic into something more useful. To get that type of door, you need to sand everything really well to remove that horrible sticker thing, and then I'm gonna create this type of U-shaped things to have some kind of viewfinders on the little bunker. I'm gonna make a small line there to have a kind of door, double door. Now I'm going to glue 2 pieces of wood on this soap bottle lid for both the interior and the base. Then I'm gonna sand all the plastic so that the paint sticks better to the surface and has that type of rust iron cast effect. And now is when we can glue the doors and the observation visors. And I have got bored of talking so much, so I will leave you enjoying a while of building without me talking all the time. Chapter 4, Prime and Paint, and finally we have reached the part in which we paint. To start with, I have used Primer, MIG Rust One Shot, which is a rust color that I love. And why this is turning so fast? What is happening? Why? Oh, no. Okay, good. Alt space F1. It worked. Nice. Okay. We need to paint a base of sandworm for this camouflage. It's the base. Then I'm gonna do a disruptive pattern, which is basically making black lines in between the dots. Why would it? Because it was perfect. I love it.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
So, I'm gonna use this masking putty to cover, everything that I do not want to be painted. And then with a pencil, I'm going to paint the corresponding camouflage spots. And I have to say that it was an error on the turret, at least. I will have to change it. It is a technique that I learned from Sergio Solo, painting his Akuyaku 1 Go, which is a Miyazaki tank. Once you cover everything really well, it's time to paint with the airbrush, and I paint with this type of rust orange color, dark rust orange color, which I love. But I don't like the turret because reminds me a duck. Like, why? Why it has to look like a duck? Nevertheless, I have to paint more things, like the green. Okay, so let's paint with Russian green. And now, I really do not like that turret death thing. Absolutely nothing. It reminds me this guy. Okay, I have to paint everything again.
La puta.
La puta, la puta, la puta, la puta, la puta.
La puta. La puta.
Well, once the rust primer is painted, it must be painted with gray shine, which is a kind of dual white that serves as a base for the next base, which is gray base, which is a kind of navy blue with gray. I'm going to use this eraser to erase the pencil lines that were not covered with the paint before, and a small cut eraser for the hard to reach areas. Now the areas of colors that were not covered with an airbrush, and a brush must be filled in. Luckily, it's only on the wheels, which will be probably covered with powder dust later or something on those lines. Now, what I'm doing is painting black lines for the disruptive camouflage. And you only have to paint here and there, and so on until you are done. It's not difficult, but it's repetitive, which is why I was listening to an audiobook at this point, probably Terry Pratchett's Discworld something. Or if not, Lord of the Rings, I guess it was Discworld. Okay, nice, this is interesting. I'm gonna use this unstirred liquid from the filters, big filters, so it's a kind of not very powerful acid, capable of removing the first layers of paint with control. I recommend treating the brown spots first, the green ones later, and the sun yellow ones later, because if you jump from one to the other without cleaning the brush, let's say for example brown to green, green to khaki or sand color, you are gonna drag paint. I learned this technique all thanks to Sergio Solo tutorial on how to paint Miyazaki Akuyaku tank. And I really love this technique. Nowadays I use it in everything, to be honest. And now we have to do the same with this sand yellow, to show the rust color of the primer. And as I really like it, I will do the same again, only on the edges of the green and brown spots, so that this effect is more defined and logical on the overall hull of the tank. Also, you can do the same with the rotation with the ring of the turret. You just have to remove paint on the border in the parts that the paint chips, and you have it. You can do the same with the turret, as I mentioned you before. That's the reason we paint everything with that type of gray shine and then that kind of navy blue. You can do the same on the holes of the gun, sight. And now I'm gonna do the same with this big brush to emulate some kind of chipping due to the movement of the turret on the turret ring. And it's time to admire our work. I really love it. It looks like real metal casting, iron casting. It has a lot of details and it reminds me this guy.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Dominic Turretto.
Chapter 5, Painting Details and Accessories. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm going to stick a decal number 2, and I'm gonna paint the tracks with a rust colored base, because later I will use Vallejo metal, and I've also painted the exhaust pipe and the engine's grills with this rust color. And this is how the turret looks after being varnished with Vallejo satin varnish for a brush. Now it's time to paint the metallic track pads until we finish. Again, it's repetitive, you can listen to an audiobook, I really recommend that. Once you finish, I recommend you to use gloss varnish for the threads, and then this thing, which is a scratches effects paint, kind of lacquer, on the threads, on closer areas to the threads, because then we're gonna paint with dust. The idea with this MIG dust is to help this later with water to remove the paint. That's what the lacquer paint does. It reactivates thanks to water. And we have cool scratches or cool effects of dust. And we have to do again the same thing. We have to use scratches effects on the threads, on the bottom, on every part that we do not want paint, and only this time to paint with earth color in key areas, not in all the threads. Only, for example, in the gaps between the tracks and the track pads, areas in which the dust accumulates. And again, we can use water, but this time it has to be subtle. So do it with care. That's the reason we have varnished the track pads before with glossy. Now we have this cool effect of metallic brighting thing and matte dust for in between the track pads. Chapter 6, Carriage and Ammo Box. Okay, first I'm going to dry brush this box and the cart or carriage with khaki over the rust brown primer. And then with MIG dust, I'm gonna paint just some random good grains on the box and then on the carriage. Note, on the carriage it's not that important to do it perfectly, because afterwards everything will be covered by dust, washing, a lot of things. Then I'm gonna use liquid mask for covering random parts with the help of a sponge on the box. And since all this will take some time to dry, I'm going to paint the carriage with oil washing, and as I said before, the poorly painted wood grains will be hidden. Of course, all of this was in purpose, and it wasn't an accident. Then, I'll paint the ammo box with this green color, and I'll use a toothbrush to remove the layers of liquid mask, creating these chips in the paint. But to make the unpainted wood different from the paint on the metal reinforcements of the box, first I'm going to use dark brown oil wash for green vehicles on the boards and the metal, and then varnish. And then, with a brush with rust color, I'm going to paint small rust chips only on the metal parts. Finally, I paint the projectiles, rust color, and varnish them on gloss. I also use the excess of rust from before to paint these on the carriage. And now I'm going to paint dust, just like I did with the tank before. First the scratches effects, then dust, then the scratches effects again, the lacquer, and then earth color. And you should end having something similar on the lines to this. The last thing is to paint that polished metal effect on the wheels using a pencil, and then varnishing with glossy only that part to have this kind of reflective effect. And this is what you shouldn't have in with the carriage. It can fit, aesthetically it looks like the rest of the tank. Now I'm painting those things with that brass color, the projectiles, and now with the flamethrower tank I'm gonna do the same. The idea was to do a dry brush over all the tank, but then the brush wouldn't get wet and stop being dry brush. I also have painted the fuel hose with rubber color, Mephiston red on the valve in the back, and also the support of the cable with rust color. And now, this is why we use that color, we're gonna use orange rust oil wash for the base of the tank, for the support, for also the exhaust of the tank, and well, this is how you can have a really good effect of rust on these parts. I also have painted that turret on the hatch and on the hull of the gun and sight. I have also painted the fuel tank with dark wash for green vehicles oil thing. I'm gonna have to paint the dust with the same technique as the carriage and the tank. Also, I have painted off camera the mobile distillery. By the way, I have not shown how I painted it, but all the techniques used are the same as those on the fuel tank and ammunition box, including the green industrial color with rust chipping, etc, basically. Then you shouldn't having something similar to this with the dust. And now we have a prop, we have props, we have assets that fit with the rest of the aesthetic with the tank, etc. It's time to remove the masking tape from the fuse to have that glass showed and paint the top of this flamethrower with brass and metallic to the part that hits and the actual kind of gun, I guess. And the last thing is to wash both the flamethrower and now the overall tank. The last thing is going to be strategically put washing in gaps and details of the tank itself. I will use the same washing again. I always say in this phase I love oil washes because once we finish we can clean everything using thinner, or even before. It dries slow, so we can bring a dry brush and by capillarity the paint will be absorbed. It gives you flexibility, it gives you control, and most importantly, it gives you time to react if something goes wrong, and from experience, something always goes wrong. By the way, once the washing has dried, I really recommend applying the thinner and cleaner immediately. You can wait an hour, 2 hours and reactivate it with the thinner, but the sooner the better, because if you wait, for example 1 day, 2 days, the pigment is gonna get fixed to the paint, actual paint of the tank or model, so it becomes more difficult to remove. Maybe you remove an effect that you do not want to remove. Now we are gonna use another oil, which is this one, to create drips in certain strategic areas, where dirt or rust can accumulate. Why do that in the tank? Well, I cannot show it right now because I do that off camera, but I'm gonna show it how I do this on the observation tower. To paint the tower is extremely simple. Russian green for the base, sand color for the line in between, sand color was the base also, and the most basic blue for the top. I have used normal white and Mephisto red for the antenna thing. And that's all, basically. I have also done drippings here, and on the small bunker, and on the tank, gas tank. Again, this is the first layer, where you put the oil. Then we will use the thinner and we will have a really cool effect, so don't bother if this part doesn't look neat or perfect. Now you are looking in the tower how shouldn't looking after using the thinner on the leakings. As I told you, it doesn't matter that you are not super precise. That's the magic of this type of tool, the oils. And now that everything is done, we can varnish with this varnish. Just keep in mind that you do not have to varnish on the tracks because we will lose that cool metallic effect on the dust and the dust effect. The idea is to protect just the paint with the washes, which is oils. If you use your finger, maybe you break it. Now I'm gonna create a realistic light. Okay, I'm gonna use basically UV resin with a toothbrush, and before I painted metallic this thing. Then, once you have done this, you have to use the UV light to dry this resin, and you have a really convincing light, instead of having to paint lenses or things. And that's all. Finally, I'm gonna use black pigment. You can also use the airbrush with a bit of black paint to paint burns on the conventional weapons, such as flamer, cannon, the other cannon, not on the Tesla gun thing with C. And also I'm gonna paint with black the periscopes and the glass, the window of the type of submarine hatch of the bottom. Then it is just to put gloss varnish on those same places, and I say that this project will be called finished.
Para to trabato tutu.
Well, that's all. Now you know how to make and paint World War I or interwar period Hobbit tanks with a Studio Ghibli aesthetic. To be honest, this project took me like 2 months. Ironically, the base of the tank, before adding all the detail, basically up the turret, hatch, that only took me 8 hours. But making a modular tank with interchangeable parts, Tesla tank destroyer as you see now, and painting off camera the Hobbit houses, all the accessories, the Hobbit itself or halfling, the video editing, the second stop-mo, all of that has taken a lot of time. But I have achieved my goal, first of all to finish it, and for you to be able to learn how to build these things with your own 2 hands. Basically you have all my tricks in this video. The purpose of this bunker, for example, is to either have a small turret of the observation or the observation tower when it's mounted on the tank. And so we have a leftover piece as terrain or scenery. And this is a secret modification for the tank, the sniper cannon. Long barrel equals precision sometimes. In the Tonks game from Apocrypha Now, which is the reason of all of these tanks, you have the possibility to upgrade the tank as you play or even use different versions. And I wanted to make a small model easy to carry that fits on the 28mm scale and visually transmit the idea of modularity, different versions like the Tesla Stug, and also Hobbits and Miyazaki because YOLO. And well, that's all for today. I would really appreciate if you gave a like, you subscribe and hit on the bell, because this is just the beginning. Take care, I'll see you on the next video.
I took ballistics in school. Fascinating subject. Things go up, things go down.